I'm just
So,
gonna say that. Okay, I'll stop.
so I just wanted to introduce our next panelists. So the Rabbi Jamie Korngold. You're also from Boulder, right?
I am,
Okay.
yes.
So maybe if you go ahead and introduce yourself and then talk about, I haven't spoken to you before, so I'm not sure what your connection is to John Muir, but I'll just hand it off to you and we'll see where we go.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. My name is Rabbi Jamie Korngold. I'm a Reform rabbi, and I am the founder and senior rabbi at a congregation based in Boulder, Colorado called Adventure Judaism. And I'm known as the Adventure Rabbi. And we, as one of our major tools, we use the outdoors as an opportunity to uplift our spiritual experience. Fortunately for us, we also have a really strong online presence. So we teach students all over the world on Zoom anyway. So we've been able to keep going during this. But really, the stuff that we love doing is being outside. And I'm a graduate of Cornell University of the forestry program there. And that's where I first ran into John Muir. And I graduated from university in '87, and the natural resources department was not very preservationist, not very conservationist. It was all about resource use. And that's when I first ran into John Muir and this whole concept that, wait a second, there's a whole nother function to the outdoors, which is to fulfill us spiritually. And that it's not just a toolbox, it's not just a playground. It is, what's that great quote about between two pine trees, you walk into every two pine trees is like an entrance, a portal into a whole nother spiritual world, So John Muir is just so full of all these beautiful teachings. And in fact, last year, we created a new prayer book for our congregation, and it's filled with John Muir quotations because, you walk into the wilderness and find yourself. You can just go on and on with his beautiful teachings. And for me personally, I started out as a normative congregational rabbi, and I realized that the prayer service just didn't elevate me like it was supposed to. And if I went for a walk outside, I could easily get to that spiritual place of feeling connected to something larger than myself, of feeling oneness, all those things you're supposed to feel, of feeling elation. And I could get it outside so easily, and I couldn't get it inside. And so now in my congregation, like for our high holy days, our biggest holy days of the year, we go for a hike, and we walk outside and we talk about what can we learn about change from nature, and what can we learn about renewal from nature, and so on and so forth. And then we have a service, but it's a little briefer. And for my bar and bat mitzvah kids, they don't just learn Hebrew, they climb a peak in Rocky Mountain National Park, and they learn about responsibility for themselves, right? If you don't pack properly, you're really in trouble. They learn about responsibility for their classmates. How do you get that kid that's having trouble hiking? How do you get her up the mountain or him up the mountain? They learn about responsibility for nature, taking care of everything else on the trail, and responsibility for the community. How are they going to treat other people on the trail? So, so we kind of integrate those two things. And the motto of our congregation is, let the wilderness awaken your spirituality. So the idea that, this is inside us, but what is it that's going to spark it for you? And John Muir taught us, go outside, it's out there. So I could keep going forever and ever, but I'll.
So what are you doing right now to kind of keep that going when you can't go up to Brainerd Lake, you can't maybe you are going to Brainerd Lake, but how are you, I mean, one of the questions I would ask too is, how are we handling doing this and not telling other people what we're doing on
I'm
social
sorry,
media?
I didn't get the last.
So how are you, because the question I had asked everybody else is, what are you seeing now? And what are you doing to kind of access that nature when you can't go into the wilderness? You can't go to those popular trailheads.
I know that for my spiritual well-being, I have to go outside. I have to. I even got what I think is going to be called COVID overuse syndrome. Like one of my knees like totally swelled up because I'm not used to hiking every day. I'm actually a swimmer. So I couldn't do my hiking. So I just went and sat outside. I post on Instagram daily as Adventure Rabbi. And I use, like today, my post was a picture looking out over Boulder. And it said, don't look so far. Don't look too far. Look at today and look at tomorrow. And that's it. Because we can't control past that. Or another day, I took a picture of a line of rocks. And I said, try to look at your day like you would jumping from rock to rock across a river. So find little great things, little things that bring you joy. Like I have hot water. And I love the yellow of my walls. Like they don't have to be big things. They can just be little things. And try to live your life jumping from rock to rock of positivity rather than falling into the despair that's so waiting for us here. So I use cues from nature to help me remember how to live my life in this time more with less anxiety, with more calm, with more forgiveness. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. It does. So I'm gonna kind of take that and segue that over to Carol Beckarello, and we have a whole bunch of different denominations here of different types of practices, and I think it's really great. And Carol can kind of, I think what you just heard from her, and maybe talk a little bit about that aspect of our spiritual nature with nature. And I really think, Carol, what you were talking about, and I remember when I came to visit you, I did hear the trees, the plants. I did hear the music of the plants. So, and you talked about that earlier, and it actually does happen in your house because you have something hooked up to the plants, and they do speak.
Since you took a walk, I'll take you over here and let you see and hear this one right here. This is let me put a light on.
And Carol, can you just tell, you're in Ohio, right?
Wing begonia. I'm in Medina, Ohio. Okay, so this plant that you see right here behind me, this is an angel wing begonia. And this plant, and nobody worked with people that developed this technology, this plant has learned how to sing through that machine without being electronically connected to it. All I have to do is turn the machine on, and this plant has learned how to do that all by itself. All the other plants have to have this cord connected to them. This plant has no cords, and it makes the machine go. You can see the lights on the machine. Whoops, there we go. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, you can see the lights on the machine flashing, and the plant's not even connected to it. And nobody believes me. They say it's impossible. I said, well, you come and tell the plant. It's the only plant that does that. So what I really like, I'm sorry, I don't know your names yet. Rabbi Jamie, is it? Okay. Anyway, I really like what you said about finding and spending time with the simple things. Because in the simple things, there's miracles in the simple things. Gosh, I've been out spreading mulch the past couple of days. I thought that's a good way to get myself dirty and put all that gunk all over me there, Roger. Yes. And so I've been out there spreading mulch. And when I do that, and I see these beautiful little worms, and I see all the little creatures that live in the richness of the earth. And I get all upset if I go to put a shovel in and I think, oh gosh, what if I hurt a worm? And I think, I'm not Tibetan Buddhist, but I'm very sensitive to hurting anything. And so here I am. Can you imagine trying to spread mulch, watching out for the worms? But it's a prayer. It's a time of being with all of those creatures. And this sacred is in those little worms that spend their lives aerating the earth and doing whatever worms do, and it's just so good to see them because I don't get to see them very often, and here they are. So and like I said, these plants, the one you just heard singing, I mean, it's incredible that this plant sings to me all day, and I say to it every morning, it wakes me up. And I say, how could I be lonely with you here singing to me 24/7? So yeah, we're just surrounded by this miracle of life, and not just surrounded, we're immersed in it. We're in it, and it's in us, and we're not separate from it. And when we talk to each other here, let's face it, we're preaching to the choir, but we have to figure out how to help other people. You cannot despair. That's John Muir. You cannot despair when you are so what's the word I want? So saturated with divinity. How can you despair? And that's what he knew. When I rewatched the film again today, the documentary, Michael, and I hadn't realized that his father forced him to memorize the entire New Testament. So the man reeked of, I think in the depths of his being, he was just in connection. He had this natural mystic propensity for the natural anyway. And then he also had the words of scripture. And then he goes outside and it all comes to life all around him and within him. And it's just amazing. And for me, the scripture isn't just the Bible. It's all of those holy words. It's all of the poetries. It's all of those things that catch me and take me to a deeper level and a deeper level and a deeper level of this oneness with everything that's going on around me and out there and in here. To me, out there and in here isn't different anymore. It's just all beautiful. So
big hug to you. Big hug.
Thank you. That's our virtual hugs.
Yeah, virtual hug.
That's one of the things I've been doing with the children. The children don't understand why they can't hug me right now. And I'm their great aunt, but I'm like their grandma. And so we go for walks together. I meet them at the parks, but we have to stay apart. And they're trying to understand why we can't hug. And it's been really interesting. It's good that we can go to the park and walk together, but it's so painful to watch the children not be able to receive the hugging, nurturing that they need from an elder. So that's been the only sorrow that I've had during this time.
So Stephen, I was going to ask you if you could just talk a little bit about John Muir, kind of going off of what Carol was saying, and maybe a little more in terms of his actual writings of this connectedness that he had to the world, because this is his birthday, and we are in celebration of him as a being that lived on this planet. And I almost feel like it'd be nice to hear from everybody in terms of one thing about John Muir that they're blessed with.
I can think of a couple things. One, John Muir is known for saying that everything is hitched to everything else. You try to pick out any one thing and it's hitched to everything else in the universe. And wow, with this COVID-19, we're seeing that in action. One person in China has this virus, and here we all are dealing with it. And so not just on a maybe tragic level, it's going to, make some of us ill and kill some of us, but just the sense that that's true of everything, that we really are interconnected. This isn't just some philosophy that somebody came up with. It's really true, and we are actually seeing it right now. The other thing about John Muir that, he's increasing in popularity like never before. I mean, you see the quote, the mountains are calling and I must go. It's like there's lines of clothing and mugs and all kinds of things. And so I think it's important to ask ourselves, how can he help us move forward in this world of ours that's quite threatened right now? And one thing that I think of, so Alan, under Trish Miller there, we're in a men's spirituality group together. And I think, we talk about patriarchal society as a lot of what is destroying the world is sort of dominating things and monetizing them. And John Muir is a Renaissance man. I mean, he's a scientist and he carefully studies things. He detaches himself and tries to see, what's the forces of glaciation or in botany. And yet he can go to an overlook and start crying. He's just so sensitive to the beauty. He's strong. He can go on a 30-mile hike, but he's tender with children. Children loved him. He's writing in the den of a friend, and I think it was in Oakland, and he's bouncing the host family of their little daughter on his knee while he's writing, And this is a man that was abused by his father, and he's so tender toward children. So I think that he's a mentor, our way forward of combining head and heart and strength and sensitivity. If you look at his journals, one page is scientific observations. The next page is mystic reflections. So this isn't something that just John Muir can do. All of us, no matter who we are, what gender we are, we're called to integrate these various parts of our being and of the world together. So I think that's part of why he's so inspirational. And his passion, he's so exuberant. People aren't exuberant these days like he is, He'd come dancing down the mountain, just ecstatic. And I think people are really turned on by that exuberance. So that's something that all of us can learn to embody in our own way.
Thank you. So let's hear from somebody else in terms of blessing on John Muir, and maybe something in terms of what he wrote about. I mean, Harold, you're definitely the scholar. I know that Rabbi Jamie was referring to that quote. Could you go back to that quote a little bit and talk about that quote? Between two trees.
Between every two pine trees, there's a new life. That was written in marginalia in one of his journals. It was not a published document, but tracked it down. It's on the website. So it is something he said. And that was one thing that's hard to figure out with a lot of Muir quotes, because he wrote different versions of them. But there's also a phenomenon of Muir misquotes today, where things are attributed to Muir because he's given such respect that aren't quite what he said. And one of them recently is, of all the roads you take in life, make sure some of them are dirt. Never found that Muir ever said that, and yet it's being put on t-shirts and all of that. And doesn't sound like anything he would have said either. So there's some of that. I have a whole page on Muir misquotes that I have to keep up to date, because people are always asking for the sources of things. But fortunately, we do have that inspiration. To me, it's not just Muir's quotes. And Muir's quotes, that the thing about everything hitched everything in the universe is probably his greatest, biggest story to us. He understood ecology before the rest of us did. But I think his other thing was just his life. As myself, as a Sierra Club activist, I found it wasn't always what he was writing about nature, but the way he lived. He divided his time between going out and experiencing nature, experiencing the wilderness, and yet at the same time having a loving family and children and a beloved wife. And he wrote letters to hundreds of people that he felt very close to. He was not a hermit like a lot of people think. He had very close friendships with a lot of people. And a lot of times he would write to the wives of the scientists that he met, because the scientists would be too busy to write to him. So he'd write to their wives and ask what's going on with the family, what's going on with the children. You know, he always wanted to know. And that's pretty phenomenal to me. So to me, it's his life. And then he was a little bit unwillingly brought into becoming a lobbyist. But, you know, if he hadn't lobbied in Sacramento to get Yosemite Valley returned to the National Park Service, Yosemite Valley would now look like South Lake Tahoe. There'd be condominiums with high rises, and, you know, it would be more crowded than it is today. So, you know, we can thank him for that. We always think about John Muir establishing Yosemite National Park as a seminal thing. But I think the even more important thing was several years later, getting the state of California to give it back to the federal government so it could be managed as a more natural area. So anyway, his life was, to me, an exemplification of dedication to protecting nature and being political in that sense, as well as enjoying life and enjoying people.
Thank you. It's such a great reminder, you know, and it's interesting how, you know, and it's how we've kind of disconnected in some ways of using John Muir with the Sierra Club as the, you know, as the example of this. You know, the Sierra Club has kind of moved away from John Muir. I was a little surprised with that when we took the film out there last year. But you very strongly do see that connection between what John Muir started as a co-founder of the Sierra Club, and, you know, he does embody what it is that I think that we feel we need with our conservation and the continuation of keeping these parks available for all people. So Sheldon, I kind of want to bring that back to you as somebody who's in the park, you know, when you are in the park on a daily basis. And, you know, when I spoke with you last year, we talked about, you know, how to bring in, you know, inner city kids and what their, you know, relationship is with, you know, with the national parks, and, you know, why it actually belongs to them as much as it belongs to everybody else, but they don't seem to understand that. And then they get there and then they're just kind of potentially blown away by the sheer beauty and the intensity of being in such an amazing place.
Yeah, I usually refer to it as a crisis of translation, cultural translation. There are so many inner city kids, whether they be African American or Hispanic or Asian, that have not had that childhood experience in a national park, which I think is criminal, because childhood should be an experience of wonder. And when you don't have that, when you're not put in a position of literally being awakened to the beauty of the earth around you, I think that to some degree is a disability, or it disables you aesthetically or spiritually or psychologically from knowing from whence you came, from where all of us have come from. And so when I see these inner city kids in the parks, I see them waking up in a way that they were not expecting. I remember clearly a few years ago, there was a young African-American kid that wasn't a kid, he was a teenager, and he was just standing there at the Lower Yosemite Fall footbridge, and he's just looking at the waterfall. And we were part of a group. The rest of the group had moved on, but he couldn't pull himself away. He was still there. And so we went back to make certain that he was all right. And I still remember clearly what he said. He still was in that vision, that transfixed state of mind of being in the presence of something he was not prepared to experience. And I said, "Are you okay?" And I remember him, he sort of paused and he said, I just had no idea that such beauty existed. And no one had ever told him, no one had ever taught him that landscape itself, that the earth itself is a communication, is its own language, a very ancient language that precedes the creation of the earth itself. And he was hearing for the first time that language being spoken, not just through what he was hearing, but through what he was seeing, what he was hearing, what he was feeling. His entire body was literally the recipient of that communication and that conversation. And what we were saying didn't mean anything to him at that point, because he was already literally caught up in that experience. And so what I'm saying by crisis of translation is that many African-American kids, for example, when they hear the word park, they're envisioning something completely different than Sequoia National Park or the Grand Canyon or Zion. They're envisioning this urban, concrete, asphalt kind of manifestation of our industry. That's what they're thinking of. The place that mom says you should not be there after nightfall as a dangerous place. And that's the sort of park that I had growing up in the inner city of Detroit. I mean, I had Belle Isle, which of course was created by Frederick Law Olmsted, but that was off somewhere. It wasn't like right there where I could just walk to. And I think that's an important point when inner city youth and urban youth in general can't walk to a place like Yosemite Falls. And that's most of America is in that position, because in 1900, most of us were considered to be living in a rural existence. By the year 2000, most of us are in an urban experience. So that disconnection between people and place, between people and the natural world, has never been stronger than it is right now, which is exactly why the words of John Muir are so important, because he's speaking about that connection. He's speaking to that relevance. He's speaking to that immersion into that ancestral, that native landscape. And when I say ancestral, I mean ancestral in the terms of Homo sapiens, not just African Americans, but it is part of who we are as beings to be part of that landscape.
And I remember we talked about that last April. I actually filmed that, what you just said, standing out there. And then we had the bear walk by, remember? We're out in the meadow, and there was a bear.
Yeah, bears,
I know.
Bears they always want to be part of the conversation.
It was just great. It was just great. So, so in terms of the other people that are part of our presentation here, our participants, I would kind of like to ask that same question of you too, and maybe you could share what your blessing is for John Muir in your life. I'm gonna go to Roger, because I don't think I've asked Roger to, maybe you could wrap up what we just heard here from everybody. I'd like to hear your impression.
Yeah, I've mentioned this to you in one little snippet before. The Catholic scholar Karl Rahner, I think he died just a few years ago. He said, the Christian of the future will either be a mystic or will not be. And I think that's true. And ultimately, I'm not so concerned about the survival of Christianity as a particular vessel. Spirit is alive and well and will show up. But people need to have guidance and invitation to realize the internal radar capacity they have to be in awe, to notice that which is bigger than themselves, that they can be a part of, that they are a part of. I think there is a growing yearning among young people they're not going to church as much, or religious, they're not going to buildings so much, but they're no less spiritual. There's a spiritual curiosity, a spiritual awareness, a depth, a hunger. And I think Muir is a beautiful portal, way to help people realize what can be true for them, that there can be an awakening, there can be an enlightenment, there can be a union available just by being intentionally, mindfully present to presence in nature. And there's a gift right now, of course, with this downtime that so many people have. And my son, who's 19, he's a first-year college student. His first semester was amazing in the fall, and after spring break, his school is closed and the wind is out of his sails, and he's been depressed. And I've been concerned about him. And he doesn't text me very often. He's a typical 19-year-old kid, right? Young man. But I saw him post on Instagram. He climbed a trail that I've not climbed at the foothills in Boulder. And there's a picture where he's lined up at the same height of the peaks of several of the Flatirons. And I don't think he climbed the Flatirons. I think he took a trail to get to where he did, but it's a heck of a photograph. And there's no way he could have been in that space and not have felt grandeur and God. And he pointed out to me in Wyoming where he first experienced God in his life. So I know he's a young man who experiences the divine in nature. He has that capacity. And I'm less and less concerned about his well-being as a distant dad. Oh, he and God have got this. He's getting out into nature and posting the photos and inviting others to do the same. Do they need to go to church? I don't know, there's a time and a place for everything, but do they need to be out in a place that they can experience themselves in their natural state? Yes. So Muir is an advocate, a cheerleader, a way shower. And I think my next gift to him will be a collection of one of Muir's writings. Yeah.
Yeah, so Heather's been over here very quiet, and I'm just going to kind of go back to you. She's my wife and also the producer on with me on the film. And this July, when was it? July, we went to Dunbar in Scotland, where John Muir was born, and kind of just going back to the idea of what that experience was like for you, and kind of connecting with his birthplace and what you had known about John Muir. You had seen the film, you worked on it with me, and then you and I are both there in Scotland.
What I thought was interesting was just how it's obviously very civilized and very, it's not quite industrial through there, but what a difference it must have been coming from Scotland and then going to Wisconsin and then heading west. Culturally, it was very, it felt very closed in for me. And as far as that, the little city of Dunbar, and then you would go walk to the beach and walk to the cliffs, and just the wind, and just the surf coming in, and the waves, and just what an experience it must have been for him to have gone where he did at such an age, and to have that awakening. I mean, I could really feel what his awakening must have been like, seeing where it started and then going progressively west, and spending that time in Yosemite that we did last year. I feel really fortunate to have been in Yosemite in April when the crowds weren't there, and it was so beautiful to see the snow in the morning and just to see it melt by the afternoon. And he describes those places so eloquently and just so beautifully, and it was just nice to see those places and experience that the way that he would have experienced it the way that he did, but it meant a lot. It was very special.
It was great to be able to take you there. So that was your, no, I know that was your first time, but you had been there maybe as a little kid, right?
I remember Yosemite a little bit, just barely, but it was certainly different experiencing it as an adult.
Yeah.
So Rabbi Jamie, how does that fit in with your book? Because you actually you have a book about walking with God in nature.
Yeah, so this was my first book, God in the Wilderness, Rediscovering the Spirituality of the Great Outdoors with the Adventure Rabbi. And I wrote 2 adult nonfiction books. The second one is called The God Upgrade, and it's about upgrading our concept of God. It talks about all the different concepts of God, like the biblical concept of God and the rabbinic. One of the things that's very unique about Judaism is we don't have one cohesive concept of God. It has changed over time as our understanding of the world has changed. And a lot of Jewish people don't know that. And so they reject the biblical concept of God, and then they reject God all over. And then I switched to writing kids' books because I found preschoolers were a much nicer audience. So now I write preschool books. But this is my first book. And what it really has to do with is the lessons that we can learn outdoors that we can't learn as well anywhere else. And so, for example, there's chapters about rediscovering awe. We talked about that. That was a big John Muir thing. That's also a Jewish concept. One of our great rabbis said, awe, rather than faith, is the cardinal value of the religious Jew. So he was saying it doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. It matters that you can climb a mountain peak and say, wow, you know, be out of words. And he taught that sense of awe, that was God. And that's not something you can pray to, but that's a concept of God, and very similar to what Muir said in some of his writings. It talks about stop trying so hard, even God isn't perfect. That's a good one. I like that there's a chapter somewhere about stop trying to get the most out of every day, which is, you know, such a everyone in our society, right? They want to get the most out of everything. And I don't think that's, I think that's really a recipe for disaster. And there's one, you'll have to tell me, Harold, if this is really a John Muir quote. I hope it is, because I put it in my prayer book. I only went out for a walk and finally concluded to stay out till sundown. For going out, I found was really going in. Is that really him?
Real
Okay,
quote.
yeah. I believe I got them all off of your website, the Sierra Club, the vault that you put together. But you know, that whole concept of striving, you know, striving, and he did strive. I mean, he did these big, long 30-mile hikes, like we talked about, but he also knew just to go inside, and that a lot of things can be found that way from the still small voice. That it's not always a big shattering moment. It's the still small voice. So I'm not sure what the original question was to me. I kind of kept going. Sorry.
I think that fits together very nicely, because I think he really did have an evolving discovery of God. I mean, there was the way that it was described by his grandfather, and then, you know, the way it was literally pounded into him by his father that he rejected. And then I think it's very beautiful that despite all of that, he still found what made sense to him later. And it was never, despite all the hardship, it never went away, and he was able to rediscover that again.
Thank you for bringing that all together. That was so beautifully done. You know, Roger, I was thinking about something that you said about that your son has found, he has his God moments outdoors. And does he need church? I don't know, but he needs the outdoors. And one of the things that I think about connecting the outdoor and indoor experience is that, and also someone talked about vocabulary, and this, I think that S. Johnson, I don't know what your first name is, sorry. But I'm talking about vocabulary, that I feel like a lot of us today don't, like, the whole vocabulary of prayer is foreign to us, like grace and divine and elevated spiritually. Like, we don't really know so much what those words mean anymore. But when we go outside, then we can experience what it's supposed to feel like, right? So there's a really simple prayer in Judaism. It's called the Shema. It goes like this: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So today, before I got on with you, I was on with my kids and my students all over the world, and I'm teaching them that prayer. So now they know the words to that prayer, and if I can take them outside and they can sing it outside, like surrounded by trees and rocks and the wind and the sound of the water, then they really get the feeling of what it means to be one, to be part of something larger than themselves. And then when they come back into synagogue, the echo of that experience can follow them, because now they can connect that prayer to the outdoor experience, and the vocabulary can finally catch up. It can finally have some meaning. So that's kind of, I look at it as like time released Judaism, and I hope that the echo follows them back indoors. So.
That's beautiful. I'm sitting here, I'm just kind of in awe of everybody that has like showed up to celebrate this birthday for John Muir with me. And I mean, it's just really sweet to meet new people and hear from my old friends and just see how this world so needs him, you know, and there's obviously other people that we need too, but you know, this is his birthday, so we can be kind of like greedy with John Muir and just his appreciation that we need to embrace and say thank you for being here on this planet for us, because it has affected me. It's affected clearly everybody who's joined in here in some small way or some big way, and it's going to affect people moving in 100 years from now when it's his 282nd birthday, you know. And I wonder what the planet will be like and how they'll think back on him, and hopefully we'll make our impact to keep his life and legacy going. So any of the participants want to chime in and say anything? We'd love to hear from you. I see Joanne is on there. Natalie just joined us. So, you know, just kind of going back to, you know, having our kids, and, you know, I took my son when he was 15 to Yosemite. It's when we went and we filmed Shelton there at the park, and was able to bring him up into the backcountry for a couple nights. And I remember when we drove into the park, that through the tunnel we came out, you know, he turned to me, he said, "Dad, this is better than what you had told me." So that really, you know, it really kind of goes to what you were talking about in terms of taking something from the inner city there. I mean, it really has that sort of impact. And, you know, the film that I made, you know, I've discovered there's other places that you can go to in the world that also have this kind of amazing impact. One is this lake up in Kitimat, up in British Columbia, that I journeyed to on a sailboat with some other people. And it really, there's a whole story behind that. It's actually at the end of the film. But, you know, it's that Thin Veil place. And Heather was just talking about, you know, having gone to Dunbar and having gone to Scotland, and, you know, you know, my impression of what that experience was going to be like was very different when I was actually there. You know, it wasn't necessarily what I expected it to be. And there was kind of a lack of the spirituality of John Muir in Scotland, but there was also this ruggedness, and how nature could be really in your face there, and you could really have the wind and you could have the rain, and, you know, there wasn't a lot of separation between you and nature. And you know, that was something I had heard about, but I got a chance to experience that as we walked the John Muir Way for about 80 miles from one end of Scotland to the other, because John Muir at the age of 10 had immigrated to the United States and actually walked with his family from the East Coast to the West Coast to get to the boat that they immigrated to Wisconsin with. But I kind of imagined what that experience would be like. The other thing we did there too was we went to the museum called the Friends of the John Muir Birthplace, which is run by Duncan Smead, who I interviewed and have a short video on going through that museum. And, you know, it was like showing us where John Muir had lived, you know, in the small little house, and, you know, where he would go off and clamber down and get in trouble with the kids on the other side of the road, or go over to the castle and climb on these craggy walls that would most likely would have, you know, kind of led him to doing some of the climbing that he did in Yosemite. But there was also that real kind of bittersweetness of how he left Scotland and how he didn't see his grandfather again. You know, the grandfather who really had kind of helped him connect to nature in a way that I think that had more of a historical significance in terms of the Scottish connection to nature, which he wasn't getting from his father. I mean, his father was more of a kind of brimstone and fire sort of preacher. You know, and so it's, you know, you go there and you have that experience of like, you know, this is where this child was born. And then you think about like your own sense of self and how that's impacted by where you come from, and, you know, and those experiences that you have with your parents or your grandparents. And that kind of takes me back to, you know, my experience with my son, bringing him to Yosemite, and that, you know, that little golden moment that we had together, you know, when he was 15 and now he's 19, and kind of like with Roger, you know, I don't necessarily hear from him every day and I miss it. And I think about the opportunities I might be able to take him off on a trip or do something with him again. But, you know, those are the sorts of things that I think you know, when we have this appreciation of John Muir, is going back to, you know, his writings. You know, the first book I remember reading was My Summer in the Sierra, and sharing that with him. And, you know, it's that kind of writing and that kind of like enthusiasm we talked about, that sense of awe that John Muir speaks of, is really, will never go away. You know, I mean, that's always going to be there, because it is in our world, and it's those who can articulate it, you know, through teaching, bringing other people into nature. We'll just continue that, and we do need to just, you know, cherish the world that we have and make sure it's here for generations and generations beyond us. So I kind of would like maybe just close this up with maybe, once again, I just want to put it out to our participants who have not spoken. If you do want to say something about, you know, why John Muir is a blessing for you and a blessing for us, or your appreciation for him, I think we'd love to hear from you. All you have to do is raise your hand, and I'll pick you. And if you don't want to, that's okay. Okay, Natalie wants to say something. You're muted right now, so there you go.
Forgive my no video earlier. I work at a high school and I have Zoom fatigue. So I was cleaning and having dinner and listening in. And I just wanted to share, I live in Martinez, California, right down the block from the Muir Strentzel house. And so I usually go attend the birthday party that they have for John Muir at the house. And so I'm grateful to have this virtual space this year. My outside time has been, I walk down to the back of the property in the evening to kind of say hello. And so that's been a special thing during this time. But I think for me, John Muir's gift has really been, and blessing has been, just the roots he's planted that I've experienced. That's kind of the image I have tonight. I have felt so connected to kind of his spirit just since living so close to the house and to the land where he spent a lot of time. And last year I went with the Park Service to where his grave is for the first time, and just loved, first of all, the whole experience of how the rangers kind of allow you to enter into that space and what they share. And they shared part of the eulogy that was read at the grave. The ranger decided to do that on this day. And something that was said was about how John Muir was like an eye within an eye. And that really, really spoke to me. So I feel like I kind of follow, we always joke, my parents and I joke, you know, the spirit of John Muir is haunting Martinez in the best possible way. And so I feel that kind of energy with me, and it's brought me a great love for, an appreciation for the area where I live, for going up to the Sierras when I can, and for sharing that with my students as much as I can.
Well, that's really nice, because you just brought it all back home again, because we started at the beginning talking about we talked at the beginning about the gravesite. Harold was sharing that with us. And when Heather and I were there last year, we were there for the John Muir celebration. We showed the film in Martinez, and it was really nice. And then I remember at the end of the day, I had an opportunity to go to the gravesite. I went by myself, and just to kind of be in that presence. And the thing that I had noticed was the trees that had been planted there, right? There were all these different types of trees. You know, they weren't all the same tree, but they're all kind of typical to the Sierra Mountains, and maybe to the orchards that he had there. And it was just kind of very, very sweet. And this gravesite is in this, you know, it's kind of in a little suburban neighborhood, isn't it? It's really odd.
Yeah, there's, however the property was broken up, it's literally, you have to drive down a residential street and essentially walk down somebody's driveway nearly to kind of get back to where the gravesite is now. So the Park Service has kind of maintained that, but now it's all within a street of houses.
That's great. Okay. Well,
We did the walk in the Alhambra Hills too.
yeah, we also walked. Do you know Jamie Foxx by any chance? He took us up into the Alhambra Hills, which is just up behind there, and it was up, in April. Of course, it's green and the wind's coming through, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
Part of the property.
Yeah. So, so we're kind of getting to the end here, and I guess I'll just go kind of do a little round robin here. Any last thoughts? Anything that kind of comes up for the panelists, the participants, as we close this out? Stephen?
Yeah. Oh, Michael. I'll take a turn.
Go ahead, Harold.
Go ahead, Harold.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I just want to bring this back about John Muir being relevant. There was a conference at the University of California at Los Angeles a few years ago that said John Muir is a dead icon and we should get rid of him because he's no longer an example for children, because children don't have the wide open spaces, the wilderness to go to. All they have is the little areas that are in their neighborhoods. And I wrote a big essay against that idea, and there was a huge reaction in the LA Times. They said they got more letters complaining about that than they've gotten on practically any other topic. But what I wanted to point out, it brings back to this thing about John Muir as an exemplar, a person who shows us that what one person can do to make a difference. The people who knew him all became people who founded other organizations, Save the Redwoods League, for example, and a lot of local organizations. And there in Martinez, there's a land trust called the John Muir Land Trust. And they embraced that name, the John Muir Land Trust, because Muir was so important to them. And they protect local kind of vest pocket parks. I mean, in the East Bay, there's some wide open spaces, more than there is in Los Angeles. But there's an example of not only wilderness in the faraway mountains of the Rockies or the Sierra, but our backyard wilderness that can be just in our neighborhoods. And I think Muir appreciated those as well. And there are people that are living today that are following, I think, in his footsteps by preserving their local little small parks in the natural areas. And so I just think that's, to me, a real inspiration at Muir. And there's lots of organizations that really followed because of Muir's writings that it just wouldn't have happened otherwise and are still influencing us today.
I'm also going to add to that too. In Scotland, they have the John Muir Trust, which is the main organization that has set up the national parks there. So, I mean, they're, as much as I thought the Scots would know about John Muir, Muir is a little bit like the last name Brown or Smith in Scotland, but the people that do know who he is have really made an impact. And that kind of goes with, the people that put together the John Muir Way, the trail system, and then, Duncan, and then we have kind of the larger organizations that we're talking about that are trying to save the land or bring the land back to be more in its wild state. So the John Muir Trust in Scotland, and then the same group that you're talking about in California too. Shelton.
I just think it's important to point out that I don't think that John Muir or John Muir's legacy will ever die out from Yosemite. He's still an icon there. He will always be an icon there. I think you can't really talk about conservation. You can't talk about the preservation of wildness, not just wilderness, but wildness itself, without talking about John Muir. He's tied to the Transcendentalists. He's tied to Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's tied to the Lake District poets. He's kind of an inheritor of all those different disciplines. So yeah, people may not know who he is, but that's different than him disappearing. I think as long as the park idea exists anywhere in the world, there's an echo of that idea that you can find, and it's more than an echo in the writings of John Muir. So he may go up and down in terms of people's perception of him, but he'll always be there, just like a star can be bright in the sky at night, and around sunrise or sunset it becomes dimmer, but it's always there.
Thank you. Stephen.
One of the things that is just striking me, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. It's just striking me as we're winding up, as I look at all of our faces and all the things I've listened to, we are all so different, and we're all here because of John Muir. So whether we knew his name before this or not, somehow what he stands for has touched all of us and has brought us together in this moment. And that's amazing to me, when we're thinking about all the ways that his spirit is manifest. And I just look at us. So thank you. I feel honored to be here. And thank you, Michael. And you back there, Heather.
All right. Stephen, you want to say something?
Right now we have howling. I thought they were coyotes, but it's people howling outside. It's 8 o'clock here in Colorado. They're howling for the rescue workers, and first responders and nurses and doctors. I just wanted to read a brief quote. It's 2 quotes put together about what Muir would have to say about this conversation about him. He says, I care to live only to entice people to look at nature's loveliness. My own special self is nothing. I am not anxious to tell what I have done, but what nature has done, an infinitely more important story.
Good. Eyewitness.
Again, Stephen put it so well, because for me, my connection to John Muir is a very spacious one. And so he will always be relevant because he takes what he referred to as his special self and calls that nothing, such that when we experience nature, the true teacher, and have that experience of expansion, he shows us a way for that, a way to get to that. So John Muir, for me, will always be relevant insofar as his own special self is nothing, just like the special self that we are. We're not different on the grander scale that he speaks about. In that way, we are one. And nature is so vast that expands ourselves, that spaciousness surrounds us, such that the little things that we refer to as our special self can be put aside. And for me, that's the greatest value that he always gives to us. And every time I'm in one of those parks, and every time I look at the vast expanse of that natural wilderness, Mother Nature just expands in me, such that the little self becomes nothing. And what a tremendous thing that is. Thank you, Stephen, for putting that so well.
You're welcome. All right. Well, anybody else? What a wonderful birthday. Did anybody bring a cake?
Brought my wine.
You're right, your wine, of course, right. I posted on the newsletter that went out today, I posted pictures of the cake, and Natalie probably knows about this at Martinez. You know, and I just love how the superintendent of the park there was actually serving the cake to the participants who had showed up for the birthday party. So I mean, I don't think I could do any better than that. So and you know, just kind of going back to what Carol said, I mean, I just feel blessed to have been able to connect with everybody here and to have made the film The Unruly Mystic John Muir, and to have been able to kind of share my interpretation of him, you know, which I think is really what we're exploring here and talking about. Nobody owns him. It's just inside of us. It's an interpretation, and it's how we express that and how differently we do that. And I think of, you know, what Harold's done at the this Sierra Club on his site is he has a catalog of all these people that have like done something about John Muir, and he has the listing there. And of course my film is on there, but it's just this listing of like an amazing outpouring of you know, somebody in elementary school or a retiree who's done something, and how they've all kind of found a way to connect to that spirit, and that spirit that is within all of us and surrounds all of us in nature. And you know, I think as Stephen said, you know, this really is not about, you know, John Muir, it's about all of us and about nature itself and about how we connect with nature. So for me, this has like been the best birthday party that I could host for this man who lived, you know, was born 182 years ago. It's pretty phenomenal. So thank you so much for participating, all of you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.